I'm Michael Garcia. I'm an artist who works in sculpture, installation, and performance. Um, Most recently completed a performance piece that premiered at the Salvage Vanguard Theater entitled Demasiado Profundo, which means too deep. And in this piece I was exploring my social awkwardness and just kind of the whole uncomfortability of speaking to people you don't know, meeting people for the first time, kind of putting yourself out there and kind of taking that leap, but still being awkward and making yourself uncomfortable as well as the people you're being introduced to. And I accomplished this by making a large box frame with fabric walls that had backlit projections of different rooms and spaces. And in this piece I was inside the box, and the only thing the audience could see of me was my silhouette. And I was mic'd and I had a camera on top so that I could see what was going on outside the box, but all they could see was my shadow. And through this I was able to kind of put up a little bit of a barrier and kind of let down my guard and be as awkward as I needed to be, introducing myself to all these people, many of whom I had never met before. And through this, I kind of upped the ante as it went along by removing an article of clothing as it went on and on, until finally I was essentially standing before everyone naked, again with the projections behind me. A lot of my work, even from beginning the sculptural into the installation and performance, I deal a lot with human relationships and interactions, and so kind of my performance work a lot of times does kind of tend in that direction as well. This piece in particular is sort of an extension of previous performance pieces I've done. One in which I was suspended on the gallery wall and people had to come up and ask me personal questions, just sort of kind of to break my shyness barrier. This one I wanted to explore kind of the uncomfortability that I often have interacting with people, and so I wanted to put that kind of on display. And the box itself was sort of like my barrier, it was like my safety zone, and people couldn't cross that, so I still had kind of that, that safety blanket, if you will, of being able to say, okay, well, yes, I'm talking to a room full of people I don't know, and yes, I'm standing here naked, but there's still a safety aspect to it. For me, it's almost like a challenge to myself also to force myself to be in situations like that. In the past, I've dabbled in playing music in bands and playing live in front of people before, and I've done a little bit of traditional theater, and I enjoy them to a point, but there's something more visceral and kind of in your face about performance that I think really is able to explore this better than anything else. I have a lot of different interests as far as writing or playing music or performing, and I've often kind of woven those things together in the past. One of my first, I think, really successful installations incorporated a lot of text that I had come up with, kind of borderline poetry prose, and that was written directly onto the walls for this installation. And I've also written some music and soundtracks for other installations, and I kind of got away from that for a while, but I feel like I'm kind of headed back in that direction. One of my first performance pieces was done when I lived in Dallas, and the MAC, which is the McKinney Avenue Contemporary in Dallas, was having an evening, sort of like an open mic night for a performance, and I put together a piece called Potato Hierarchy, and in that one, I was like this masked figure uh, who like donned corporate clothes and did this kind of absurd dance with these other shirts that were stuffed with potatoes, and it was like this waltz, and it included some music that I had composed for it. And throughout the dance, the potatoes just started flying out everywhere, hitting people in the audience, and like they were just, they were just strewn everywhere. And a woman named Cora Cardona, who's the director of the Teatro Dallas, or I think technically it's Teatro Hispano de Dallas, and she saw the piece and she really enjoyed it, and she asked me to perform it in her space. And so that was kind of my segue into like traditional theater world for a while. I kind of met her and she asked me to do other projects with her. One other piece that I did through Teatro Dallas was for their yearly Day of the Dead show, and their theater space had burnt down, and so they didn't have anywhere to perform, and so she came up with this great idea of putting up this huge tent out in a field and putting on the shows there. And so it became a circus tent, and it became El Circo de la Muerte, and so it was like this circus themed show with all these different vignettes written by different people. And I did a performance piece called The Downward Climb, which was kind of dance and performance kind of mixed together. And in that piece I was this figure who was kind of dying inside, and he had this briefcase, and he would keep pulling these things out of it and kind of interacting with them, and with the music, and kind of this almost like a funeral dance, like he was dancing in his own funeral. And by the end of the piece, he just kind of lost all his identity. So those are probably two of my first pieces, and favorites, just because I think I was kind of a little more naive back then about performance, and there was something about that naivete that kind of made it really raw and real.